Thank you very much, Mr. Kant, and a very warm welcome to all of you. I know it's been a very, very hectic morning for you and a hectic year. It's been a momentous year for India. When you look back, what would you say has been your most memorable and your most favorite thing that's emerged from this presidency?
Well, I won't say most memorable, but I would say the toughest moments are negotiating the leader's declaration, because you have 20 G20 countries plus 9 invitee countries. All these countries are at different stages of their growth. They have different national circumstances. They negotiate every single word. So we start at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We end up at 2 p.m. in the night. Every word is fought for. And the challenge for a Sherpa is to tell them that look at where we'll take the world for, in the next 20, 25 years, and drive climate action, drive sustainable development goals, drive technological transformation. Keep the big picture in mind, but there are huge, huge challenges. So it's been a very, very tough year.
It's been a tough year. It's not only for us as a country, globally, because there was a war going on. You have this whole China factor that's playing out. How did you manage in terms of just getting all stakeholders on board? And how confident are you that we will have some conclusions and some communique coming out of the meet that's scheduled for September 9th and 10th?
Yeah, so, the key is that, one is that India has done its presidency very differently. Unlike doing it in one city or two cities, we've taken it all over India. The Prime Minister's vision was that we should take it to all the states. We've done it in 60 cities of India. We've transformed these cities. Number two, we made it a people's presidency so that everybody participated in it in some manner or the other. The third is that our priorities are very important for the world. The fourth is that we've emerged as the voice of the Global South.
Right.
The Prime Minister started the G20 by holding a Voice of the Global South Summit. And throughout our discussions and our deliberations, the focus on the developing South has been very important, because 80% of the growth is coming from Global South. 2/3 of the growth is going to come from Global South in the next 2 decades. And therefore, resources should flow into Global South. So our focus has totally been on Global South.
So, Mr. Kant, I want to ask you, Make in India is big for us, Atmanirbhar Bharat is big for us, but we're also operating in a world that is looking inwards increasingly. There is rise of trade barriers, tariff barriers, and so on. So how does India as a country walk that tightrope walk? How do you do the balancing act between protecting your own interests and yet emerging as the voice of the Global South?
So, Shweta, this is a very interesting question, because if you look at it historically, after every pandemic, there is about 5 to 6 years of protectionism in the world. America is doing it, China is doing it, many other countries are doing it right now. I'm a great believer in free trade. I'm a great believer that free trade lifts people above the poverty line. India believes in free trade. In some of these areas, India has to fire on manufacturing, it has to fire on agriculture productivity, it has to fire on urbanization, and along with services. And therefore, when you focus on manufacturing, you'll have to adopt some policies where you can get the size and scale. That's how we brought in the production-linked incentive. So some policies so that manufacturing can take off to large-scale size and scale is necessary. That's how America is doing the Inflation Reduction Act right now. It's a highly protective policy. But overall, the policy of India is quite market-oriented. We are believers in free trade. We are pushing for free trade. In 1 or 2 areas where Make in India is important, we will push for schemes like production-linked incentive, so that, which is linked to production, which is only linked to production, so that you can make large companies grow bigger and bigger and bigger.
So hardware, IT hardware prominently features in that list. Is that the reason why we've seen tariff barriers coming up on import of laptops and PCs?
So, in some areas, these issues are coming up. I think it's will be appropriate to understand the specifics of that and that is that in its quest for becoming a manufacturing nation, the challenge is not about getting them from other parts of the world. Some of these constraints are coming in because technology, etc., requires to work with trustworthy partners. So the issue of trust comes in some of these areas, especially IT and hardware, and that is why in some areas, we have imposed some restrictions. It's for the government to decide and take them.
Sure. How close are we, in terms of deciding the key discussion points for the G20 meet that's happening in New Delhi on September 9th and 10th?
So we have been doing round-the-clock negotiations. Our key priorities are basically strong, sustainable, inclusive growth for the world, because 1/3 of the world is in recession. Germany has just gone into recession. Our priority is sustainable development goals, lifting people above the poverty line. Because of COVID, the world, instead of progressing, has regressed. We need to accelerate the pace of education, health, nutrition. Our priority is climate action and climate finance. Our priority is restructuring, redesigning multilateral institutions so that more resources can flow in for climate change and SDG. And our priority is women-led development in a very big way. That is PM's priority, that women's empowerment and gender equality is very critical to growth in the long run. Technological transformation and digital public infrastructure is again a big emphasis for us. How to use digital public infrastructure to provide identity to 4 billion people of the world, bank accounts to 3 billion people of the world, and fast payment to 133 countries of the world. The Indian model of DPI is ideally suited for that.
Right. I wanted to zoom out a little bit. Post this presidency, how do you see India standing in the world? And what is the new global order looking like?
So, post the presidency, two things will be very clear. One is that India will be a very, very key player as far as global growth is concerned, because we are the 5th largest economy. By 2027, we'll be the 3rd largest economy in the world. Number two, our voice will carry a lot of weight globally, because we've been able to bring agreement on a range of developmental ambitious issues for the world. Number three, our voice will be the voice of the global south. That is important. Fourthly, India will emerge as a major technological leader, driving both what you have seen during Chandrayaan, where India has emerged as a space leader, and through the digital public infrastructure. We are going to see growth for the next 3 decades of India's story.
That's very, very optimistic, and I love that view. In fact, at Moneycontrol, we've started a campaign called MC Bullish on India. My final question, I know you have to leave. I want you to just tell our audiences here on the sectors that you are personally bullish on, that you think will be driving India's growth.
Well, I've been a long-term believer that there's a paradigm shift taking place in the world. Firstly, all companies which are going digital in a big way, there's a digital transition taking place in the world in a very big way. Secondly, there's an energy transition taking place in the world. The world is moving from fossil fuel to cleaner forms of fuels like renewables and clean energy. Number three, I think it's very, very important to get into sunrise areas of growth. To my mind, the sunrise areas of growth are electric mobility, they are green hydrogen, they are all areas of digital transformation, and to my mind, battery storage will be a very key area in the years to come. I also feel that India will make a quantum jump in mobile telephony manufacturing because of the policy framework. And therefore, I'm a great believer that these areas are important, but Indian banking is right now very, the twin balance sheet problem is being totally, done away with. India's banks have very good balance sheet, India's corporates have very good balance sheet, And I think what you will see now is the golden period of India's growth, with more and more private sector investment coming in to drive India's growth trajectory in the coming years.
Okay, we do have 5 to 7 minutes, so I will continue asking my questions. You know, Mr. Kant, you've written a wonderful book, Make in India, and you've been a big proponent of building domestic capacities. Also, India has been working on cutting red tape and making it easier to do business in India. As part of this G20 presidency, how higher up is this in the priority of India to actually simplify and incentivize businesses to come and set shop in India, especially when it comes to cutting the regulatory red tape?
So India has done a huge amount of transformation. It brought in the goods and services tax, replacing 28 different taxes and cesses. It has brought in the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. It has brought in the Real Estate Regulation Act. It has brought down the corporate tax to international levels and redefined MSMEs, which was pending for about 30 years. So these are radical reforms. And India's, made massive changes in ease of doing business at the central level. It has done away with 1,500 laws. It has set the groundwork for big growth. The digitization and the reforms are huge in India, and that's why I'm very bullish on India. My belief is that this similar kind of reforms must be carried out by every single state of India. States have to emerge as a big driver of growth in the coming years. And if you have about 10 states growing at 10% plus, then India will grow at 10%. The second key challenge to my mind is that India cannot grow on one sector, that's services alone. India must become a manufacturing nation to create jobs. India's agriculture productivity must increase, and India must have sustainable urbanization, because we'll see a lot of people moving from rural areas to urban areas, and sustainable urbanization is very, very critical for India.
I want to talk to you about climate financing. That's my last question, I promise.
Yeah.
Climate financing. What is the sense that you've gotten when it comes to capacities and capabilities and interests within India and across the world in terms of funding sustainable businesses?
We have worked out that based on both the requirement of global south, developing countries, emerging markets, the total requirement for SDGs and climate, which are both two sides of the same coin, is about 5 trillion. The world has enough resources. Total amount of investable surplus available in the world is 350 trillion. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds themselves have about close to 150 trillion. So 350 trillion is available, 150 trillion with pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, etc. Now, you need that to flow to Global South. Global South has more risks, and therefore multilateral financial institutions should use their balance sheet to do indirect lending. They should do blended finance. They should do credit enhancement. They should do first loss guarantees, so that more and more resources flow to the Global South. That will be good for the world, because 80% growth is going to come from the Global South. There is young population in these countries. That is the future of the world.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kant. I know it's been a busy day. One life advice: how do you manage to be at so many places, in a day? How do you manage to do so much?
Sleep well and do exercise for 1 hour every day.
Do you do that?
Yeah, I do. 1.5 hours.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you.